Buenos días a todos. Me da mucho gusto darles la bienvenida a esta nueva sesión de nuestro podcast, de nuestras pláticas de Neextt Talks, en esta segunda temporada. Para nosotros, como saben, este foro lo hemos creado para que sea un foro de intercambio de ideas, de conocimientos, de experiencias, de aprendizajes que no solo lo hemos tenido durante estas épocas de la pandemia, sino de antes, y sobre todo con la idea de poder construir una mejor industria del turismo hacia el futuro. El día de hoy tenemos el honor de tener con nosotros a Fred Dixon, quien es presidente y CEO de NYC Company, la agencia encargada de promover turismo a la ciudad de Nueva York. Como saben, quienes han participado en otras sesiones de Neextt Talks, del lado derecho de su pantalla tienen una caja de chat donde durante la sesión nos pueden dejar preguntas. Estas preguntas nosotros se las haremos a Fred al final de su presentación. Muchas gracias a todos por acompañarnos. Como saben, también esta sesión la pueden ver en nuestro canal de YouTube o en nuestro podcast por nuestro canal de podcast en Spotify. Fred, welcome to Neextt Talks. If you can please turn on your camera and your mic.
Hola, Carlos.
Hi, Fred. How are you? Welcome to Neextt Talks.
Thank you. Thank you. Buenos dias, everyone.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to have you here. Fred, at the beginning of the session, we saw this video about only New York City. Can you please explain us further what is the strategy that your office is following to reactivate tourism in New York?
Yeah, absolutely. And Carlos, thank you, my friend, for this opportunity. It's really great to be with all of our colleagues in Mexico. We miss everyone very much, and we can't wait to welcome you back to New York. But as Carlos said, you know, we are like many of you. We're in a new frame of mind as we maneuver this pandemic and the impacts that it's having on the global travel community. We are currently running a campaign called All In New York City, and that's what you just saw one of the video elements from. It is really speaking to New Yorkers at this moment to remind them that this is still the greatest city in the world, right? This is a tough moment for everyone. Sometimes we have to be reminded about our opportunities and the positive things that are at our back in terms of propelling us forward through this situation. And All In celebrates the immutable spirit of New Yorkers. And so that's what you're seeing in that work. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about it and share some of the work that we've been doing in our roadmap for recovery.
I think it would be great if you can share with us the roadmap that you envision, you know, so everyone on the audience can understand how a city as New York, like New York, is planning to reborn in terms of tourism.
Absolutely. It would be my honor to share it with you. And, you know, this is one of those moments, Carlos, where we all learn from one another, right? So hopefully we can inspire some fresh thinking. And I would love any thoughts or any experiences that the audience is having in Mexico. We like to learn from others. So I think this is a great opportunity. So I'm happy to share.
That is exactly the idea behind Neextt Talks, Fred, is building a community around the tourism industry where we can share ideas and learn from each other. So if you can show us what is the roadmap to recovery, we'll be more than happy to.
Terrific. All right, let's get started then. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm clicking, hold on. Can you see it yet, Carlos?
No yet. It's.
Let me look. Hold on one second. Let's see.
Well,
I see the button, but it's not responding to me.
okay, give us 1 second.
Sure.
Well, can you try now?
Yes. It's still not. I see the button, Carlos, but it's actually not activating.
So let us maybe una disculpa a todos, estamos teniendo un pequeño problema técnico que resolveremos en 1 minuto. I think what we're going to do, Fred, is we are going to, the technical team is going to be running your presentation. So just tell them next whenever you need them to move to the next slide.
Perfecto. Gracias.
Okay, so there we go.
Very good. Excellent. All right, we're good. Everyone can see it.
Yes, now we are on.
All right, here we go. So if you move to the next slide, we'll get started here. So hopefully everyone knows NYC Company. We are the official destination marketing organization for the 5 boroughs of New York City. We are the tourism board for all 5 boroughs of the city. And our mission is a simple one: to maximize travel and tourism opportunities throughout all 5 boroughs, build economic prosperity, and spread the dynamic image of New York City around the world. And we're so proud to have worked with so many of you in the Mexican market over the many years. Next slide, if you would. Thank you. So put it into perspective. You know, what are we talking about sort of at the current moment? When we look back at the size of the market last year in 2019, we had a record year. I know, like many of you, we had just finished 10 consecutive years of growth in tourism to New York City. We welcomed 66.6 million visitors last year, and they brought to the 5 boroughs $72 billion in economic impact in US dollars. 47.4 billion of that was in direct spending in hotels, restaurants, shops, and cultural institutions. What we're seeing right now, of course, is the absence of 67 million visitors and 67 million consumers in New York. And I know that's what the Mexican destinations are feeling in many ways as well. When we look at the local impact, and this is really important as we talk about tourism's positive impacts on the community and why government needs to pay attention, we contributed $6.7 billion US in local tax revenue last year. That was for city and state taxes. And that tax money saved the average New York City household $2,100 annually in household taxes. So with tourism gone away, each household would have to pay that much more to get the same services that they've been receiving. So it plays obviously a very important role in the community. And at our height last year, we represented 396,000 jobs. And that's about 9% of all the jobs in New York City. Makes it the 7th largest sector in terms of employment. Next slide. So this paragraph I'm going to read to you really outlines the framework for this time that we're in with COVID and also with racial unrest. We have not shied away from these challenges, but we've leaned into them thanks to our dedicated staff and the New York City tourism community. So we are having a very broad conversation about what does it look like to restore tourism, but how do we build back in a more equitable and fair way and make sure that tourism's impact is as positive as possible on the community and our people. So this is the framework through which we're doing all of our work. Life has changed in dramatic and unexpected ways this year. Although these changes have had a particularly strong impact on New York City, we as New Yorkers have once again shown the world our trademark resilience. What follows shows our revitalization campaign and the plan behind it, designed by and for New Yorkers, that speaks to capture the infinite experiences of New York City life and the immutable spirit of the people who live here. And that is so important. This is an invitation to all of us New Yorkers and New Yorkers at heart in Mexico and around the world to go all in on this city as we begin our inevitable revival. So next slide, if you will. So using that approach, one of the very first things we did was we looked back to past crises. You know, New York is no stranger to crisis. One of the lessons that we all learn very often is you never bet against New York, because this city is resilient, and we have a passionate community that stand up to help defend it and to help it recover. So by late spring in May, we had created the Coalition for New York City Hospitality and Tourism Recovery, led by some of the greatest leaders in our industry. Our former chairman of our board came back into the fold, people like Emily Rafferty from the Metropolitan Museum, Jonathan Tisch, the chairman of Lowe's Hotels, and Tim Zagat, the founder of the famous Zagat Guide. All past chairman of our organization came back in to assist us. We also called on 5 leaders from the community from different sectors to help us lead this dialogue and create the plans for recovery. And that included Ellen Futter, who's the president of the Museum of Natural History, Thelma Golden, who's the president of the Studio Museum in Harlem, Danny Meyer, one of our most famous restaurateurs. He has Gramercy Tavern and Shake Shack, and the Union Hospitality Group. Danny's been a great leader and a terrific partner for us over the many years. And then we tapped some celebrity friends. Lin-Manuel Miranda stepped up from the Broadway community to lend his voice and to lend his thoughts and his network to this important work. And then Peter Ward represents the hotel union, so representing labor and the hotel workers in this important dialogue. And then our coalition actually was joined by hundreds of organizations across the city, businesses both big and small, to help us work towards recovery. And it's really important to underline the role of arts and culture in this work. And we made sure that we not only had the big museums involved, but the small arts organizations as well. I cannot imagine a New York City in the future without our fantastic arts community and without our small businesses. So it was really important that they be part of this effort and at the table for these conversations. And I'm proud to say that they have all stepped up in amazing ways. Next slide, if you will. So through the work of the coalition, by July, we had created the roadmap for New York City tourism's reimagining and recovery. And this is a comprehensive document that pulled from some of our best lessons from the past, pulled on some of the best thinking for the moment that we're in, and takes into consideration the landscape that we all are navigating. One of the things that we recognized is that everything is going to be hyper-local for a while. You know, people really are not going to be, one, may not be able to travel long distances for many reasons, be it border closures, quarantine requirements, travel advisories, or the pure economics of so many unemployed. So opportunities are really going to be local. As I like to say, we always fish where the fish are. And right now, the fish are in the greater New York City region. I'm sure it's true for many destinations in Mexico as well. So it is in phases. It also recognizes that there are going to be starts and stops, that there will be advances and setbacks. We're seeing right now COVID cases in the United States rise throughout the nation. You know, unfortunately, we do not have a national strategy to address this virus and its impact. Every state is left to their own devices and their own strategies to control it. And we're seeing that impact because right now, as of today, there are 43 states out of 50 that are on the New York City quarantine requirement list. So only 7 states in the nation can come to New York City and not quarantine at the moment because their cases of COVID infection are too high at the moment. And most recently, just a few days ago, both New Jersey and Connecticut, our 2 neighbors here in the Northeast, both of them reached that same plateau. The interesting thing there, of course, is that so many of them come into the city for work or live in New York and work in other states. So we have to treat those 2 states differently, but there is incredible vigilance and incredible commitment to the public health here in New York. Everyone, you know, saw what happened here in the spring of 2019 or 2020 rather, when the virus, you know, came to our country and it hit New York so badly. No one wants to go back to that. So I have to tell you the commitment is very strong here in the community. And I think the Northeast overall continues to do a really great job. But all of that is factored in to say that it's going to be a bumpy road. It's going to be a long road to recovery, but we're prepared to go on that road, and we're doing it as a community. So next slide, if you will. What you're going to see here are the goals. So these are very simple. Through the lens of hospitality and tourism, with our roadmap and the work of our coalition, our first goal is to show New Yorkers and those in the greater metropolitan region the way forward to safely reconnect with the city they love through neighborhood exploration and staycations. And I will tell you, this has proved much harder than we thought it was going to be in the beginning. Everyone has moved into this mindset of cocooning, of staying at home more. There has been a general fear of big cities because of our density. So people are really staying closer to home. It's been more of a challenge to get people to come into the city from outside than we thought. I've said, and I never thought I would speak these words, but the city that never sleeps has really gone to sleep over the past many months. It is starting to open back up. We have many business sectors that are open, but we still have a long way to go to make sure that we are rebuilding confidence. I can tell you today, New York City is one of the safest places to be in the United States from a public health perspective. Our infection rate is just a little bit over 1%. That's in the top 3 performing areas in the entire country. So New York is safe right now, and we're determined to keep it that way. But people are really reticent to travel very far, and we're seeing that. We also want to remind the world that New York City is not only the greatest city in the world, but also a safe place to visit from a public health perspective. And that speaks to that first goal and this entire notion that we have to remind everyone of a shared commitment that we have. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that with our Stay Well pledge. We need to get visitors excited to travel to New York City again. Everyone we talk to, everyone says, I can't wait to get back to New York. And many of the experiences that they're looking for, whether it be Broadway or our wonderful nightlife, has not reopened yet. So we have to keep everyone enthused about New York. We have to keep their excitement level high. And we're doing that through virtual content and other promotions that are echoing around the world to keep the brand alive and vibrant. We also have to restore confidence among meeting and event organizers to choose New York City so a foundation of business is secured for the future. What we're seeing is, and I'm sure you're seeing it in Mexico as well, many event organizers are postponing their events. Right now in the state of New York, we have a limit of 50 people that can gather indoors for an event. If it's a religious organization, they can go up to 1/3 of the capacity, so that's for church services and the like. But for meeting and event organizers, it's an incredibly challenging time. And so we're seeing big events and festivals and trade shows and meetings push off into the calendar time and time again. We're now seeing events in the spring and the winter of 2021 push more into the summer and into the fall. We know there's going to be a moment when it is going to be safe for people to resume meetings, and we're going to see, I think, a huge flurry of activity. But right now, we're working on booking business for the far out years, 2022, 23, 2024, and beyond, competing with Mexico in lockstep on the World Cup bid for 2026, along with our friends in Canada to the north. All of that work is continuing because it's very important that we grab as much of that big event business as possible so that we have a strong foundation as we move through recovery. Given the racial unrest and the conversations, particularly around the Black Lives Matter movement here in the United States and around the world, it's really important to us that we help every community to recover. And part of that is reinforcing New York City as one of the world's most diverse, inclusive, and welcoming cities. This is very much at the heart of our brand. New York City is a city of dreams. That's whether young people come here to pursue an education or they come here to pursue a career, be it in fashion or theater or film or art or finance in Wall Street. People come to New York to realize their dreams. And that's true for travelers as well. We feel strongly that New York is on everyone's bucket list. And I think that's still true today as it was 1 year ago. And our job is to make sure that they feel welcome and that everyone is celebrated in New York. And then lastly, of course, the big goal is to help put New York City's 403,000 tourism and hospitality workers back on the job. They have been incredibly impacted. I know you all see the stats like we do. The travel industry has been hit the hardest and has the longest road back to recovery. So that goal is obviously the big goal that we're all working towards. That once those workers are back and safely employed again, we know that we will have achieved recovery. So next slide, if you would. I'm going to talk you through some of the initiatives. I think we can go ahead to the next one as well, please. There you go, the plan. So the plan really is, at its simplest level, is in 3 phases, and we call them rise, renew, and recover. And what you see in the right-hand corner there, the blue circles, are our target markets for these phases. Knowing that borders are so closed, many flights have been taken down. The entire European Union, UK and Ireland, even Canada, and of course China and Brazil and Mexico, have had incredible challenges with border openings back into the United States. So really, to sustain our local businesses, we really have to fish where the fish are. And they're in this greater region here around us. So it's at the center is New Yorkers. And I have to say, one of the biggest challenges we faced coming out of lockdown, I don't know if you experienced this in Mexico, but was just ensuring New Yorkers that it was safe to come out of their homes and begin to explore their own neighborhoods again. This has been a complete reset in terms of the way people perceive their own safety, public safety, and engaging with the community. And so showing people how to get back out and explore their neighborhoods was really important. One of the first things that we did was we stood up a public art campaign. We commissioned 50 artists to create new work reflecting on COVID, and put them up on bus shelters throughout the city and gave everyone a map of where they are and said, get out and go see this amazing art by these emerging artists. Those kinds of very simple ideas were really key to help people get out and to safely explore outdoors. And we needed to show the world that New York City was reconnecting with itself, right? We had to restore New York City's trademark vitality, its vibrancy on its streets, because the city had gone to sleep. And so it's been a very slow process of that. Some people are still sheltering close to home, and that's understandable. If they're a vulnerable population, if they have older people that they live with, you know, these are very personal decisions. So we're encouraging those that can and are comfortable to begin to get out and explore their own neighborhoods, other neighborhoods nearby, to support small businesses that are trying to stay open right now. So it's been really important. We came through RISE in the late spring. Renew was our process really over the summer, when we began to talk to New Yorkers about getting out and exploring throughout the region. We launched some big campaigns, and now we're in Recover, which is our big vibrancy effort with our global partner MasterCard, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in the next slides. We can go ahead to the next one, please. So we talked about public health a second ago and the importance of it, and this is a very simple idea, but it's a very powerful one. One of the things that we have to do, and we learned this early on here in New York, was that masks save lives, and that masks are the way forward to helping contain this virus. Now, that belief is not widely shared across our country. Unfortunately, we weren't even hearing this message coming out of the White House. But we knew here in New York, from the terrible situations that we were in the spring, one of the only ways that we came out of that was this shared responsibility that we all have to one another to wear masks, wash our hands, keep socially distanced. So that is not just a single pledge that we take as individuals. In the business community, it is a joint pledge that businesses and guests take. So the Stay Well Pledge was launched in the early summer. We have this in a toolkit that's available to businesses throughout the city. You'll see this on storefronts when you go in, and these businesses have taken the pledge to do the things that you see on the screen. As businesses, they are going to limit capacity in accordance with the guidelines. They are going to monitor their employees' health and make sure that they are healthy, and if they're not feeling well, for them not to come into work. And they're also going to respect distances and make sure that their businesses are laid out in a way that allows 6 feet of distance between customers and staff. And as guests, we have to remember to also stay 6 feet apart. It's incumbent upon us. We also should pledge to use contactless payment wherever possible, and we should stay home if we're not feeling well. And then all of us need to do the 2 things at the top: wash our hands, you know, in a routine manner, as the CDC has advised us to, and to wear masks. This is what's going to keep us safe as we go forward. It's going to keep our community healthy and help our businesses to reopen. So this is one of the most important messages we're putting out into the market. Next slide, if you will. So all in. So when we thought about the revitalization effort, you know, this is not normal tourism marketing, right? You know, we're facing a situation of complete lockdown, complete business closure. How do you restart and reboot an iconic destination from the ground up? And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we needed to do was to steel the backs of New Yorkers, if you will, to remind New Yorkers, hey, you live in one of the most amazing cities in the world, and that has not changed. It might be asleep right now, but it will be waking up, and we all have to go all in on our city to help it recover. So we went out with a global RFP to all the creative agencies that we know here in New York, across the country, and around the world. We had over 60 campaigns that were submitted to us for this idea, that what we are calling the revitalization effort. And the all-in campaign won because it's a very simple notion. It's this simple idea that celebrates the immutable spirit of New Yorkers, some of the most resilient people in the world, and the fact that when they get behind an idea, there's nothing that can stop them. So the ask is simple. We're asking everyone to go all in on New York. And this is the effort that we've been standing up all summer long. So if you would, on the next slide. one of the first things we needed to do was to show that vibrancy and keep our brand alive around the world. So one of the first efforts that we stood up was virtual NYC. And it sounds like a simple idea, but organizations big and small varied in the amount of content that they had available online. So we've been working with organizations, particularly small ones that didn't have the resources, to put a lot of their content online. One, to keep their brand alive, to keep audiences engaged around the world, and to help them try to raise money where they could, because many of them have shops online where they can sell goods. There's also selling memberships. People that love MoMA, for example, the Museum of Modern Art around the world, are renewing their memberships to help support the museum. That's true also of small organizations throughout the 5 boroughs. So virtual NYC has been really important. Today, if you go on our website, nycgo.com/virtual NYC, you'll see more than 250 different online experiences from the world-class arts and culture organizations that you know and love across the 5 boroughs. And this has been a terrific way to support artists, to support small businesses, to support art and culture, and to keep the brand of New York City alive and keep people, quite honestly, entertained around the world. Now that we've all watched everything on Netflix and we've seen everything that there could be on television, if you're looking for new content, I encourage you to come here and you'll find some great entertainment and some worthwhile viewing. Next slide, if you would. We took that same idea and we applied it to schools, right? Schools and teachers are more challenged than ever in teaching remotely, many of them. So, you know, New York City, many people don't know this, but New York City is the #1 destination in the United States for educational travel, for school trips. You think it would be Washington, D.C., but it's actually New York. And that's because of Broadway and arts and culture and all the things that there are to do in New York. But Washington, D.C. is #2, but New York actually is #1. So we knew we needed to do a service for the teachers and for the students. So we stood up NYC virtual field trips, which brings all of that content together in a curriculum fashion for schools to use here in New York, in Mexico, around the world. And it's been a real success. And so if you have a friend that's a teacher, if you have a student in school, I encourage you to suggest they go to nycgo.com, look up NYC virtual field trips, and they'll find lots of great content in different categories for students to explore and classes to explore. Next slide. So public art, you know, I mentioned earlier, one of the important things we needed to do was to get people, you know, comfortable with going out of their homes. And one of the great things about public art is it's free and it's outdoors. And New York has a ton of it. You know, New York is celebrated as one of the great cities of public art in the world. So we undertook that program, as I mentioned to you at the beginning of the summer, where we actually commissioned 50 emerging artists, 10 from each of the 5 boroughs, to create new original pieces of art reflecting on the lockdown and COVID and racial unrest. And I have to tell you, it's the most beautiful collection of art that was created by people of every background across the 5 boroughs. We gave them space on bus shelters, we promoted them, we told their stories online, and we used it as a way for people to get out and begin to explore the city again. So if you go on our website and you look for the public art edition, that initial emerging artists program is down now because it ran over the summer, but you'll see an entire year, an entire catalog of public art coming up through the next 12 months and through the end of 2021 at sites all across the 5 boroughs. So if you aren't 100% comfortable with going inside yet, if you just want to get out and explore, this is a great way to do it. Go to a neighborhood that you've been wanting to see, find this great public art and hear their stories. It's a pretty cool execution and one that I'm really proud of. Something that will live on after COVID. And the next slide, if you would. So when we talked about the vibrancy, you know, I said we were in Rise in the late spring. That was getting organized as a phase, producing the roadmap. The summer we spent in the renew process. That was standing up the virtual content, getting all of our partners online, organizing the coalition, promoting the roadmap to recovery. And as we moved into the recover phase, right, Rise, Renew, Recover, we're now in recover. It really was about creating stimulus and promotion within the marketplace to encourage people to get out and about. And one of the ways that we've done that is pulling some of the best tricks we have from our past programs. You may know we run New York City Restaurant Week. Restaurant Week is our biggest program. It's our most famous franchise. We also run Broadway Week and Must See Week. These are all programs where you can get 2-for-1 tickets or price fixed menus. What we did is we took all of that thinking and we put it into one program called Neighborhood Getaways. And because businesses need flexibility today, they can offer whatever discount or package they want. MasterCard has stepped up and is providing $100 US in cashback credits on your credit card statement when you shop at these participating businesses. So for experiences, which are restaurants, attractions, and cultural organizations and retail, for every $20 you spend, you get $10 back. So it's basically you're getting 50% back on every $20. And then for hotels, if you book a staycation in one of the boroughs, the hotels in the 5 boroughs, you're going to get $25 back on every $100 you spend. And that's all thanks to MasterCard and their generosity and our tremendous partnership with them. So this has been a real effective program. We're seeing some uptick in it. We thought it was going to be, a panacea. We thought it was going to be, the silver bullet, that this was going to make everyone come back right away. But it has not done that. And I'll be honest with you, and in many ways, because people are still challenged to get out and about. Not everyone's completely comfortable moving around. But this program has begun to thread the fabric of tourism back together. And this is something that we're going to be doing throughout the remainder of the year. And then we're going to be refreshing it as we go into the winter and spring of 2021. MasterCard has been fully committed, and we can't thank them enough for their partnership. It's going to take programs like this to support small businesses and to encourage folks to continue to get out and to explore. And then next slide, if you will. I think that may be the end. Yeah, that's the end. So Carlos, that is the roadmap. That is all in NYC, our revitalization effort. The community here in New York is incredibly resilient. I have to tell you, as I said, we've been through crisis before. This is the biggest one we've ever faced, for sure. But everyone is all in on New York, and it's inevitable recovery. And together we're going to get there. It is going to be a long road. Some people are saying, the travel industry in particular, we may be looking at more than 2 years to get back to where we were. Some of the hotel analysis I see shows that it might be 2024 or 25 for rate and ADR and RevPAR to recover for the hotel community. That's not surprising, because interestingly, after the 2008 economic recession, we still had not recovered rate parity in 2019. The hotels were still priced below where they were before the economic downturn. So it's going to be a long road for sure, but we are committed. We're keeping our eye on the horizon, and we can't wait to get to a point where we are able to welcome you all back to New York. So Carlos, thank you for letting me share that.
No, thank you, Fred. Thank you for sharing with us. I think what is really interesting, and I think it's a great example, is that you are putting the community at the center of strategy. The main objective is to re-engage with the tourism community in the city and generate or get those jobs back. I think that is a great example for other cities. It's you mentioned that last year you had almost 67 million visitors, and in your roadmap right now, your priority are the hyper local, the locals and the driving market. What percentage of those 70 million were the driving markets to New York?
Yeah, great question. And it's surprising for a lot of people when they hear the answer, because we are seen as a international crossroads, right? And New York is the most visited city in the entire United States by international travelers. We had more international travelers than Miami and Los Angeles combined. So when you think about that, it's really significant. 20% of our visitation has been international. 80% is domestic. And of the 80% that's domestic, half of those come from the drive market. So they come from the region. So it's quite a huge number. And part of that is because we have such a huge population here in the Northeast. We're surrounded by, it's not as big as Mexico City, of course, but we're surrounded by about 18 to 20 million people here in the greater metropolitan New York City area. And we only can count you as a tourist if you travel more than 50 miles or if you spend the night. So if you're coming from Philadelphia to New York to see a Broadway show, that's more than 50 miles. We get to count you as a guest, as a visitor. And Philadelphia is our #1 domestic drive market or train market, because many of them will take the Amtrak to come up to New York. So it actually is quite a large part of our normal visitation. Much of it is day trippers more than overnight guests, but there is still a large enough base of customers here in the Northeast that we can sustain the business until a moment when international borders are reopened, flights are back up, and people feel comfortable traveling again.
Yeah, so definitely you are fishing where the fish are, as you
Fishing
say.
where the fish are. That's it.
And I heard that during the summer, the hotel occupancy was around the 35%. Is there any projections for the winter or the spring? Are they going slowly increasing those occupations in hotels?
Yeah, and I'll even go further on that. You know, if we were running and we have been running in the 30s in terms of occupancy. A good percentage of that, half of it, in most cases, was actually housing the homeless. You know, we have a large homeless population here in New York, like other American cities. And under New York state law, we are required as a city and a state to provide housing for anyone who doesn't have it. So it was actually the government's requirement to provide housing for anyone who has lost their home. And of course, many of the shelters are congregate settings, right? Where you have multiple people sharing one room. And in a pandemic with a virus that is as infectious as COVID, that was not a good idea. And so those individuals needed to be moved out of congregate care and into hotels temporarily. And so what you were seeing in some of those numbers was actually as much as half of that 30% occupancy, and sometimes even more depending on the neighborhood, was actually homeless housing. That's going to continue for some time until it's safe to put those folks back into the shelter system. So our real leisure occupancy rate was much more like 10 to 15% over the summer, which is really amazing to think about when you think about New York and how we've historically had some of the highest occupancy rates in the nation. But what we are seeing for the months ahead is that it's going to be relatively flat. You know, we're trying really hard to encourage staycations, to encourage New Yorkers and people from the region to come in and stay. Not everyone is completely ready to travel yet. And so that is going to be a difficult struggle to get those numbers back up. And we think until there's a vaccine, which, you know, let's all hope that we will see progress on the vaccine and its distribution in the first half of 21. We're really projecting, and it looks like all the surveys support this as well, that the hotel recovery will begin after Q1 next year. And then will be a slow march as we rebuild and markets open up and people begin to travel more fully.
Yeah, but it's again putting the community and the New Yorkers first, no, giving those rooms to those homeless people that were in need. Talking about international, Fred, we all know that the most important air corridor in the world is the New York City London route. You know, is there any plans to do a bubble for that corridor?
Yeah, and you know, I would like to say that it's Mexico City, New York is the most important. That's one of the most important to us for sure. But London, New York, no, is by all measures, you know, the most important air route in the world for passenger volume, for revenue, and connecting two of the world's financial hubs. You know, at the height of travel last year, we had more than 36 daily flights between New York and London. You know, and those were filled with obviously business travelers who were paying the premium rates. They kept those flights very profitable for the airlines. And then, of course, it created an enormous vehicle or channel for leisure travel between the UK and New York. And that's why the UK always is our #1 market, because there's such availability for transit. But yes, there are conversations ongoing between the UK government and the US government, between the state of New York and London, on what it will take to reopen the London-New York route with an air bridge. There's a lot involved in that. You know, part of the challenge that we're all seeing right now is that we do not have a rapid, reliable test. There are rapid tests out there, but they don't have a high enough reliability factor to allow us to test someone as they enter a facility or before they board a plane, knowing that they're safe, you know, to travel. And then so until those tests become more accurate, which, you know, the experts say that could come by the end of the year, if not the beginning of 21, you know, we're going to be challenged. But one of the ideas that's being put forth for the air bridge is a negative PCR test, which is more reliable. That's the one with this cotton swab. So you'd have to have a negative PCR test within 72 hours of departure. Once you land in New York or in London, you would still have a quarantine, but the idea would be to reduce it from 14 days down to, say, 3 days, for example, where you would have a second test after 48 hours in the destination, And if you were clear, then you could be released from quarantine and not have to spend 14 days in quarantine. That is the idea. It's all in negotiation right now. There's been some speculation that we could have that beginning before the Christmas holidays. We'll just have to see. What happens. You're seeing the rates go up in the UK in terms of infection. It's going up now here in the United States again in this new wave. What impact will that have on those discussions, is yet to be seen. But there are efforts to relaunch that flight, and we think it's a really critical, important step, but it has to be done correctly.
As you mentioned, for Mexico, the second most important international route is Mexico City, New York. It's really close to the Mexico City, LA, in terms of passengers. And how do you envision in the future the regional travel? How important will it be for the North American region, the travel within North America?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very important, especially as long as our COVID response in this country is so fragmented. It's been unfortunate that we've not had a national policy, and I'm not trying to be political on this at all, but the U.S. has been a bit of a mess when it comes to dealing with this virus broadly, and that's something that we all have to recognize and we have to address. I wish we could wish this virus away, but that just is not the science here. We all have to act responsibly to get the situation to improve. So I think traveling domestically is going to be, I think, a big opportunity for quite some time. I think everyone has pent-up demand. I know I do. I can't wait to travel. I can't wait to come back to Mexico City and to explore your beaches again. But there was another panel that I was on 2 weeks ago, and one of the panelists actually described the travel industry as a coiled spring, a spring that has been compressed and that is ready to be released, and that it will spring back. And I do believe that's true from a demand perspective. I think as long as everyone feels safe, the travel industry will bounce back very quickly. But I think it will take time to get to that process. And I think domestic travel is going to be a huge opportunity for some time. New York the United States actually has more outbound trips to the world than we do inbound. There are more Americans that travel around the world than international travelers that come into the United States. So there is a deficit there that we actually can use as an opportunity. If we can turn more Americans, inward to traveling around the U.S., that would be a goal, and I'm sure it'd be the same for you all in Mexico.
Yes, most of the airlines are resuming their flights, their international flights, and we know that Americans are coming to Mexico as we speak. In Cabo, in Cancun, in Puerto Vallarta, there's Americans that even decided to quarantine there. And we also know that Mexicans, even though officially the borders are closed, Mexicans are traveling to the U.S. It's according to the U.S. Travel Association, more than 100,000 Mexicans have arrived to New York, to the U.S. during this pandemic, which is an important number. Officially in New York, if someone arrives from not only for those 40 or 45 states that you mentioned, for also internationally, people need to quarantine. What is that process? If a Mexican arrived today in New York, what is the process that they need to follow for the quarantine?
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out, Carlos. And I've heard those stories as well. I have, actually have some friends that are looking to relocate to Mexico, to Puerto Vallarta in particular. So I think it's a real opportunity for your nation, I think, in every way. But yes, the official rules are once you arrive in New York, right now as a domestic traveler, the 43 states are on the quarantine list. Now international markets as well are on the quarantine list if they don't meet the tier 2 standards as outlined by the CDC, and only very small nations are on that list around the world. I think Bermuda is one of them that's nearby that's on that list, but it's very small markets, most of them very far away. Most major nations do not qualify at the moment for that exemption. So international travelers by and large arriving into New York are required to fill out the governor's health advisory form. This is part of the test and tracing work that they're doing. So you have to identify, your contact information, where you are staying, and how they can contact you if they find out that you've been exposed in any way. you are required to shelter for 14 days in the place of accommodation, whether that's you're staying with someone in their home or whether you're staying in a hotel. That is the official rule, and so that is what we have to promote, because it is through these policies that the scientists are telling us we will be able to keep the community safe and the tourism industry on a path to recovery.
So I'm reading a question here that someone in the audience sent us. It's, if a Mexican wants to visit New York, if they travel direct, they will need to quarantine and follow that process. If they travel through other US city, it's most likely they're going to follow the same process. Or if they travel to the tri-state area, they will follow that process in the other destination that they arrive first. No? For instance, if they travel through Boston.
Yes, that's right. And you'll see, particularly in the Northeast, most of the states have similar travel requirements. Some states, like Massachusetts, also have quarantine requirements. So it depends upon your port of entry and where you're traveling from. I've heard from travelers who have flown into other states, have quarantined there for 14 days, and then moved into New York. And as long as they are meeting the state's guidelines, that is what we have to encourage folks to follow along, because that is the order that's come down from the governor. But you're right. I mean, the part of the challenge remains that state by state, the policies are different right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I have here another question from the audience, Fred. What will be your recommendation to other tourism authorities to take into consideration for their own recovery strategies?
From a destination perspective?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, for us anyway, just speaking from our experiences here in New York, recognizing, one, the impact that this has had, and of course we are all taking it very seriously, but recognizing the pain that small businesses in particular are going through. This isn't a time for people to have extra budget to spend for marketing. That's why the role of the destination marketing organization or the tourism board is so important right now, because we are the ones that really can pull the community together, not only to help them, find business, but to also give them hope, right? I mean, I think that's one of the most important things we can do right now is to help them strategize for the long term. And for some businesses, we have to be quite honest, if the market is not going to be there to support them, they may need to take a pause for a moment, and they may need to reserve their resources for a moment for when the market is more fully ready to be open. The thing that I worry about the most is that our small businesses, our restaurants, our small retail shops that bring the flavor alive in New York, and our arts organizations won't survive this long recovery period, because it is going to be a long period. I wish I could say there's a light switch somewhere and we'll find it and flip it on, but that is not the case. So if businesses, it's an individual decision. Everyone needs to decide for themselves, what their reserves look like, what their appetite for loss and risk look like in terms of trying to stay open. And it's remarkable the businesses that have shown that fortitude and stayed open and found ways to reinvent themselves. And in these moments, necessity is the mother of invention, and this is where we have to get out of our boxes, and we really have to think about, what are the basics that we need to deliver here. And one of them is public health, and two is we need to help them find the fish, and that means finding spending or support any way they can, whether it's through virtual programming, all under the brand of the destination, or whether it's market promotion with partners like MasterCard. Creating programs to drive business in a responsible way is the role of the tourism board right now, and that's what we have to continue to play. So I think just being inventive, I think looking to, in particular, young people who have embraced technology. I can tell you on our coalition, we have so many young, bright leaders that really have brought some terrific ideas to the table and a remarkable fortitude, and we're learning from them and other content creators in that space. To advance the dialogue and keep the brand alive. That's one of the important things right now. I do feel strongly, I'm bullish on the future. I am bullish on travel. I am bullish on New York. I'm bullish on Mexico. I think, we are going to get back to business. We all just have to make sure we're building the bridge to get there. And that means we're going to have to do things that we may not have done before. So I think, for us, every idea is on the table. You know, we're not opposed to any fresh ideas, and I think we're going to be in that mindset for quite some time.
I totally agree with you, Fred. I think it's going to be a long road, but also we have an opportunity to rebuild this industry in a better way, and it's time to be I think that the name of the game is to be creative, to survive, to hope that this is going to be ending soon. And again, I see that we all in this industry have the opportunity to rebuild this in a much better way that we had in the past. It's been a pleasure to have you during this session of Neextt Talks, Fred. Any other things that you want to share with the audience?
No, Carlos, I'll tell you, you know, you and I go back a very long way. And, you know, from the very earliest days from when we met, I always wanted to work with you. And it's ideas like this and the programming that you're doing is why I've respected you so much in the work that you're doing. Because, you know, we have a shared responsibility here. You know, we don't just have a shared responsibility in our communities to keeping each other healthy, but we have responsibility as a travel industry to help others along and to inspire new thinking and keep the conversation positive. I do think a lot about people's mental health. These are incredibly challenging times, but it's that sense of community and the shared responsibility that's going to see us through. And I have immense respect for you, my friend, and the work that you're doing. And I thank you for letting me be part of this. And let's go all in on recovery. We're going to get there. It's going to take a little bit of time, but with the partnerships we have and friendships like we share with you, I am confident we will get there.
You know, that the respect is mutual, Fred. And as you said, it's times that we all make a closer relationships. We all work together. And as you said, it's not only in New York, it's all in tourism. And the idea is for everybody to work together for a fast and better tourism industry recovery.
That's it, exactly.
Thank you, Fred. I hope to see you soon, either in New York or Mexico City. It's going to be a pleasure. Thank you again for being here.
It won't be long, Carlos. I'll see you.
I'm sure.
Stay well.
Gracias a todos los que nos acompañaron. Muchas gracias por ser parte de Neextt Talks. Como saben, podrán entrar a la página web de neextt.com. Ahí podrán encontrar la reseña de este Neextt Talk. Igual encontrarán entrevistas y comentarios, ideas de los líderes de la industria del turismo, de todos los sectores. Lo que hemos tratado es incluir a todos los sectores, a todas las partes de la industria para hacer un foro donde podamos intercambiar ideas, podamos intercambiar conocimientos, para, como platicamos con Fred, todos como industria cerrar fuerzas y buscar mejores formas para una recuperación más pronta. Igual en nuestras redes sociales, Facebook, Twitter, nuestro canal de YouTube, el podcast de las sesiones anteriores los pueden bajar en nuestro canal de Spotify. En noviembre tendremos otros 2 nuevos invitados. Habrá gente de aerolíneas, habrá gente de agencias de viajes, para así en diciembre tener nuestra última sesión del año de Neextt Talks y cerrar nuestra segunda temporada. Muchas gracias a todos por acompañarnos y nos vemos en noviembre. Gracias.